Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is more or less a part 2 to the video I did yesterday on the Sola Busca. I took out my Sola Busca yesterday for the first time in years, and because I was organically reminded of it through a sequence of things that I had been, rabbit holes that I had been going down. And it was time to take it out and to study it. And then after I put it away yesterday, I wasn't done, and I took them out again. And one of my viewers, who was gracious and generous enough to make comments regarding the Sola Busca, Patrico Time 5478, I think, has gone down the Sola Busca rabbit hole, him or herself, and has spent many years studying this deck. And the insights they shared were very interesting, and I would encourage you always with any of my videos to always check and see what my commenters or the viewers who comment are, because a lot of times they really add to the conversation. At any rate, it was interesting because Patrick commented that they believe that there was an evil eye represented in this sequence of 22 cards. And I was like really encouraged to hear that, because I had simultaneously come up with, I think so too. I thought that I kind of was thinking that there was a reference to the evil eye. Now, the card that Patrick suggests represents the evil eye was not the card that I think is. But it's interesting that we both came up with the possibility that the evil eye was represented here. Now, the evil eye is nowhere indicated in a regular deck of tarot cards, So, and so I wonder, and I think perhaps that some of these cards have multiple meanings. There's a reference to the evil eye, but maybe there's a reference to something else, And so I want to impress upon you that my understanding of these cards is just based on my very limited observations and access to resources like Google Translate, right? Okay, I'll hold the suspense no longer. My mother was Italian, and she was an educated woman. Her father, who was born in 1898, was an educated man. But they were still superstitious. And I learned about the Mallorca and the evil eye as a kid growing up. In fact, I have multiple amulets against the evil eye that have been passed down to me from my female ancestors. So I was thinking, when I was looking at these cards, what kind of Italian things might be hidden in these cards? Now, I thought of the evil eye, Now, that was a stretch, right? It was a stretch. But then I started just reading about the evil eye in ancient Rome, okay? So I read about the evil eye in ancient Rome, and one of the things it said was that one of the cures, if a man believed that he had been cast the evil eye by an enemy, was to, now this isn't me saying something nasty, this is me repeating what the history wrote, okay? But the cure, one of the cures for the evil eye, was for a man to ejaculate his semen directly into the eye of the person who cast the evil eye on him. Now, those are some weird people, right? That's like some weird stuff, right? So I read that and I was like, oh my goodness, okay. So I put it on the back burner of my mind. And then I decided to put the cards in an order to see how the cards, or the people, or the figures, because every one of these cards is representing an individual, a person. I wanted to see how the characters looked at each other and how they responded to each other, one right after another. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to put all 22 cards in a row, but I was able to manage 3 rows of 7, which I know sounds so cliche, but I did it that way anyway. And I'm bearing in mind that all the cards on every end, I still put next to the other cards that came before it on the row before, just to see how they look. Anyway, when I did that, something really struck me. And I am not going to speak it, I'm going to show you. Now, what do we see here? We have a character, Mario, who I immediately just thought of Mars, and there is, reference to Mars with sometimes with the emperor. But at any rate, we have Mario here with this phallic symbol. The hilt of his sword is very phallic. I mean, I can't imagine that was a mistake, right? So he has this phallic trajectory. And look at the trajectory. The trajectory is just about exactly in this guy's eye. And the guy is holding his eye. Wow. So I thought to myself, oh my goodness, if there's an evil eye in this deck, I think it's right here being cast on this guy and this guy curing it. So that was the first connection I made after I started looking at the cards after my first video. That was the first thing I discovered. I was like, oh my goodness. So it really interested me. And so then I decided to just continue to see what I could see. The next card after Mario was number 5, Catulo. And I looked up, what Catulo meant in Latin, and it seemed to have been a reference to a poet who lived during the time of Julius Caesar. In fact, they had like a love-hate frenemy kind of relationship. And Catullus, I think his name was, wrote very popular poetry. Among some of it was very explicit, sexual in nature. In fact, it was so sexual in nature, I think some of them hadn't even been translated into English until like the late 1800s or the early 1900s, because it was so explicit, it was like indecent. But anyway, Catullus, who I think this is representing, and he is wearing a laurel wreath, which kind of suggests, or the kind of wreath a poet would wear. I'm not sure what he's holding. That's an instrument I'm not aware of. But at any rate, he was a sensitive sort, I guess. He had an unrequited love with a married woman. He called her Lesbia, but her real name was Codia, and their relationship wasn't reciprocated. He died very young. It's not known how he died. However, when I look at his card, especially the facsimile card, it looks like he has a stab wound to his leg and blood coming from it. And I don't know if it was done by this thing, because if you look at the shape, right, the shape of this wound sort of coincides with the shape of the bottom of that thing. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it kind of looks like a bloody leg. At any rate, the history books apparently don't know how he died. But at any rate, he wrote sexually explicit material. And it's interesting because the card that comes right after him, the 6th card, Sesto, is the card that we would traditionally associate with the lover card. Now, there isn't the depiction of more than one person, so there's not a sense of romance here. But I was wondering if, because this is such a sexual, people would have recognized that he was a sexually explicit poet, in other words. Coming right before the card that traditionally represented the lover card, I wonder if the combination of these two together is just a hint. And the word sesto, 6, being similar to sex, I think, right? Could it have been a play with words? That this is the lover? I don't know. Now, it also occurred to me that some of the cards, most of the cards that I pointed out yesterday didn't seem to be in the order that I would have expected them to be in. Like, for example, the card that I personally identified as the as the hermit with a hunchback and elderly, right, with a torch. He's 18 rather than 9. And then the devil card that I thought was the devil yesterday is number 17. And it does come before the Tower card, but it comes a couple of cards before the Tower card. So it doesn't properly illustrate the concept of vanity comes before the fall, right? But I thought to myself, surely there must be some cards that, if Sesto could be representing the lover as a play of words with Catullus, then surely there may be some other cards that coincide with a traditional sequence. And there were two that hit me immediately. One was the number 10 card, because Venturo was a very easy card, a very easy word to figure out with Latin. It's suggested ventures, venturing forth. So as it coincided with 10, I made the connection in my mind. I was like, that must be seeking, moving forward, Now he is moving to our left, which is not the direction that we would typically associate moving forward, right? We would think moving forward because we tend to read left to right. But it's still, the word suggests moving forward, and it is connected to the 10th card, the 10th number. So I'm thinking that this is probably a reference to venturing forth in your life, to seek your fame and fortune. Another card that occurred to me could be in keeping with the position that we're accustomed to is this one. Number 7. Deo Taro, which my friend Patrick down below, if you comment, identified this as something else completely. And his evil eye, he chose something else for his evil eye. So although we both came up with the conclusion that there was an evil eye in this sequence, we both came up with different ideas for what that was. And for this card, I imagine that it kind of reminded me of a chariot, because we've seen chariots looking like this before. And these bottom things are a little bit ambiguous. We can't really tell if they're wheels or if they're just rounded knobs, for a chair, for a throne. But he is wearing a laurel wreath of like a champion, right? So it occurred to me that the number 7 card might indeed represent the chariot. Okay, what other ones? Now, Patrick commented on my observation yesterday that posthumo means after death, which I discussed. And so I thought, could this be a reference to the death card? We see a skull. And Patrick indicates that since it does literally mean after death, maybe it was referencing the judgment card, the penultimate card right before the world card. But this is only number 2. This is only the number 2 card. So it's very low in sequential order and prominence and importance. So it's kind of a hard pill for me to swallow that judgment would be so low in the rank, But I don't know. I don't know what the truth is. And this may be lost forever. Nobody might ever really know. But I do think it's a very interesting possibility that it could be representing judgment. Oh, and Patrick also indicates that the bottom of this thing that he's holding, posthumio is holding, looks like a torch, but even in the I'm trying to find it. Even in the facsimile deck, it really doesn't look like the flames of a torch. It really looks like a plant. However, this could be 500 years of not looking like, the bright flame, the ink or the paint rather could have like faded or something and no longer looks like a flame. So that's a distinct possibility. Okay, what else did I come up with? I probably had more observations in yesterday's video, so of course I'll make sure. I hope you do look at it, because some of those were really they really caught me really interestingly. Okay. Well, one of the things that I thought of was, why was this chosen to represent the ultimate card, the world card? Now, it was easy to kind of identify it just visually, because well, I already was familiar with the Fool. We've seen this before, and plus it was labeled, right? And this wasn't labeled the Mundo or anything like that, but it was similar enough to other cards of the Italian canon that I could identify that this probably represented the world. But then I started looking at it to say, well, why does this represent the world card? And so I did a cross-reference, of course, to Nabuchodonosor. I know I'm not saying it right. My husband, it rolled right off his tongue. He knew right about this guy. Nabuchodonosor, who was a king in ancient Babylonia, who was known for having, among other things, destroying the temple in Jerusalem. And it kind of why would this be considered a card to aspire to? Why would, if it's a reference to this particular king, now maybe the king did a lot of other things, but the first thing that I read that he did was to destroy the temple in Jerusalem. So then I thought, could this be a trace of anti-Semitism in the late 1400s Venice? So I did a little more searching, and I discovered that in fact there was indeed anti-Semitism in Italy at that time, in Venice particularly at that time. In fact, by 1516 or 1518, 1516, it was the first time, I think, in history that the Jewish people were legally and officially segregated from a community. And that was in Venice, and they were put in a Venetian ghetto. So I thought that was very interesting. So it tells me a little bit of something about these folks, that the folks who did this deck, who commissioned this deck, they were obviously very wealthy, and they obviously probably felt threatened by anybody else who was usurping, their thought of how sometimes people feel. In politics as usual, people don't want other people to have what they have, right? There's a sense of, I've got what I've got, but I don't want anybody else to come close to it. I don't want to be threatened. I don't want that to be, so I'm wondering if that's what that is about. And I'll have to look at it some more. And, this is a snail's pace now, mind you. When I am doing my little research, it's with my Google Translate and just with Googling, because I don't have any books on the Roman Empire, and I don't have any Latin books or anything like that. So it's a really slow snail's pace. In fact, speaking about snail's pace, one of the pictures or one of the images that pops up continuously in these 22 cards is a nautilus, or a reference to a snail, right? And it frequently occurs in the hats, the headgear. Let's see, I think it's mostly in all the headgear. So then I thought, okay, we've seen the snail in other tarot, and I think the reference there, it could mean a few things. Well, first of all, in Venice, it could have meant that they just ate escargot there. It is a seafaring kind of place, right? It is a port, so maybe they were known for escargot and it made them rich and famous. I don't know. I don't know for a fact. I'm just being silly. But I think also that the snail had also been known as a symbol for strength and determination, perhaps, and to personal fortitude kind of thing. So the image of a snail or the Nautilus symbol could be referencing that as well. And I don't know if there's going to be a Sola Busca part 3. I don't know. Because like I said, my understanding of these cards is very limited, and I don't have the resources here. And the rabbit hole will take a long time to figure out everything that is in these cards, all the nuances. And then why they're in the order they're in. Why they're in the order they're in. You know, which is really curious to me. At any rate, I hope you've enjoyed my little rabbit hole in the Sola Busca. And I encourage you to participate. And if Patrick Otime 4578 ever wants to get involved in a video talking about, you know, this, and you definitely know, you know, infinitely more than I do. I only know what I can think I see, which could be completely wrong. But I'm always up for engaging in conversation about tarot. I just don't know how to facilitate a live thing, but I would be more than happy to do it. So if any of you at any time would like to try to do something like that with me, and I would do it, you know. I'd have to try to figure out how to do it, but I would be happy to do it on my channel. And at any rate, until next time, friends, peace and stay well.